he learned what, something shocking, and he took off with it, and he passed away, I think, in 2012, living and working at that time in Albuquerque, I think it was, not far from a military base there. And so there goes a dead end to this story because the photo has never surfaced. And when he was confronted shortly before he died, first he denied it, and then he said, well, yeah, I saw it, but I gave it back. And of course, all of his answers were inaccurate and slippery and evasive. So that's suspicious in itself. His name was Walter Wayne Fisk.
So who, now in the higher government, when we started here, and in your book, I think the first chapter alludes to the fact that FDR had this weird press conference the day after where he was talking about celestial objects or whatever the hell it was. Who else in upper government knew about this? Truman was obviously from Missouri. Now that you said he actually spent a short amount of time living in Cape Girardeau. Is that correct?
That's right. Truman was a resident of Cape Girardeau in the summer of 2006 when he was in the National Guard Armory, and he was training for his full military membership, and he was later called up in World War I. Harry lived there, and he had some friends there, including Garland Vronebarger, the photographer. And but to get back, FDR talked about hemispheric defense the day after the crash that I feel is that would be Friday, April 25th. And when that airplane was flying over Cape Girardeau at the same exact time of the press conference. But Truman was president of all people. He was not even supported by FDR in 1940 for the Senate seat from Missouri. And Harry had to fight for every vote he got, and he won. And suddenly, in a few years, FDR's just got to have him on the ticket to help run the country, knowing that Roosevelt was very sick and might not even make it through his second term. It was as if he handpicked, of all people, someone with knowledge of the fact we're being visited and the 1941 crash story. In 1947, when Roswell happened, there's some documents that referred to the Missouri discovery of 1941. Gee, what could that have been? Yeah. But it was a document printed up for President Truman to read. And you notice they didn't elaborate like, what's this from 1941? Because he already knew what this was.
Right, right. Well, I mean, it's really, that's kind of a sideline too, but along with Gerald Ford, Harry Truman was probably the most accidental of presidents we ever had,
Yes. That's really, a strange twist of fate. Yeah,
it is.
He did at least, he did get elected as vice president, and then he won the presidency on his own. And late, when he had only a few months left to go as president in 1952, some photographers and news people with a camera recorded him, and you could watch the video on YouTube, asking him about these flying saucers over Washington. He says, oh, we've always had flying saucers and whatnot. We brought them up with the military at every conference we had. Well, wait a minute. UFOs were supposed to be total nonsense. That was the official government story and not worthy of any discussion or investigation. And here's Truman admitting on camera, we've always had these things, and we've talked about them at the highest level at every conference. And that's just astonishing. He just kind of blurted out the truth. I'm sure he regretted it after he opened his mouth.
Well, but, there's a whole bunch of presidents who've said offhand comments that, that when taken together, it's like it's obvious everybody knows everything.
Yes. Like George H.W. Bush once said, I know some things. He kind of smoked about it.
He
may have said something while he was having a drink on an airplane and said, yeah, I've seen the files. I've seen a body. I've seen a photograph. So you get these, as you call, side stories maybe, or not direct, but I know they're called secondhand or hearsay, but that doesn't mean they're inaccurate or untrue.
Well, especially coming from a president.
Yes, what are we supposed to think? When Obama and Bush and Clinton go on these talk shows, they're brave enough to be asked, the hosts are brave enough to ask, what about, are we alone? Are we being visited? And they give a flippant answer and they don't want to talk about it. And so what does that tell you? They could easily dismiss the whole thing right there.
They don't say no. That's the thing. Yeah. So you also, now you did some speculation in your book too, and I do want you to talk about this, about the fact that maybe what was found at Cape Girardeau influence the development of the atomic bomb? Maybe.
Yeah, I could have gone into that further. My publishers didn't want to dive into that area.
Well, that's because you're
So I kind
speculating.
of
I
cut
know.
that back.
But the
Yeah.
thing is, I understand that, it's like, yeah, but the thing is, your speculation, like I said, first of all, you're reasonable. And secondly, it's a reasonable conclusion to draw, or possibly anyway.
Yeah.
At least
we were having trouble. Yeah. We were having trouble perfecting the atomic bomb. And the very scientists who are working on it, like James B. Conant and Dr. Vannevar Bush, were involved in apparently looking at crash recoveries over the years of UFOs. And this is according to some uncovered documents that Ryan Wood has on his majesticdocuments.com site, which is something I highly recommend. It's kind of eye-popping, the kind of stuff that he's accumulated, and he's put in a book. I certainly recommend that. I also recommend the book.
I have his book right here on my. I can't.
Oh, okay.
Right here. It's like, because
there you go.
He has a chapter on Cape Girardeau in here, and it's certainly not as comprehensive as your book, but it's still pretty good. I've read it.
Yeah. He looked into the case, and he had a slideshow presentation, and he did a good job. I don't quite agree with all the early conclusions on the case. If you look at a few matters, we had, for example, the mayor of Cape Girardeau was a hardcore Freemason who just happened to gain access to Vice President and then President Harry Truman. They would have little private meetings in the years to come. And it's like, well, what would this obscure small town mayor, even though he was a Freemason, have to do with Harry Truman? So you got to reasonably speculate they had a whopper of a story to discuss and how they kept the lid on it from 1941 forward. So there's all kinds of interesting connections. FDR himself was a hardcore Freemason. He considered his family the greatest Masonic family in the country, and he hired almost nothing but Freemasons for his cabinet, and including someone from the Bureau of Labor and Statistics named Stuart Rice, who I was contacted by his son before he passed away a year or so ago. And he told me, my daddy took me to this storeroom underneath the Capitol building to look at 3 glass jars with 3 dead aliens in them and some strange metal debris. Now, that corroborates what Cordell Hull, the Secretary of State under FDR, said or told his cousin, Reverend Turner Holt, that Holt told his daughters actually, that he too was taken by Secretary Hull under the Capitol to a storeroom and shown 3 glass jars with 3 dead aliens floating in, with the big bulbous heads and the black eyes and the strange grayish silver metal. And he was asked, why don't you try to pick it up? And he thought it was going to be heavy. And instead, it was light as a feather. He couldn't believe it. And so this happened sometime in the, apparently in the early 40s. We can speculate now in the month or so after the UFO crash in Cape Girardeau. And the stories really slot together nicely. In 1941, there was no Pentagon, no CIA, no great science lab in Washington, D.C. Where else would you put these when you might be worried that, is this the first step in an alien invasion? What's going on? So you want to keep the lid on it, keep it well protected in an obscure area. So again, amazing confirmation along the way that we can put together as best we can as civilians out of the loop in 2026.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because it's good for people to realize there was no CIA. Well, hell, in 1941, there wasn't even an Air Force. Like you said, it was the Army Air Corps. None of this infrastructure we now take for granted existed then.
Yeah.
So,
and in the weeks after the crash, for some reason, President Roosevelt formed, in his mind, the 5 Eyes program, which means 5 different nations would unite to keep their eyes on the skies or anything unusual happening. What a surprise!
Geez,
and it included like Canada and England and France and our allies. In the weeks after the crash, this was formed. So what a coincidence, huh? There's another example of things that stemmed from the immediate aftermath of the crash, the Air Corps was turned into a better organized Air Force, especially when World War II broke out for America. It had been going on for the rest of the world practically for a couple of years, but America got involved in December of 41, and that's dispersed just about everybody all over the planet.